Hey, and welcome back to another episode of the Girl Boss Method podcast, hosted by myself, Ritu Bra. So today's episode is, again, an insight into our weekly educational topics that we present to the ladies inside the program. And we do this every week as part of the program. And today, our topic that we are going to be discussing is PCOS. So PCOS is pretty well known, and it's probably because we know so many people with the syndrome. However, it's important to note that there's not really a great deal of, the research behind PCOS is actually quite behind. So we are going to be having a look at what is out there, and a lot of the research that's used does have a bit of a crossover with type 2 diabetics, for example, and the reason being is usually because of the effects of things like insulin resistance. So we're going to be talking about a few different, or we'll touch on a few different lifestyle factors with regards to PCOS. So we know that there is actually a high prevalence of this. And although we cannot cure it, we can help with lifestyle interventions in terms of helping to improve some of the symptoms. So just to break it down for you, firstly, PCOS, what does it stand for? It's polycystic ovary syndrome. And I've got a diagram on the page. Now, this has been taken from my studies when we covered PCOS. And it's the diagnostic criteria for having PCOS based on the Rotterdam criteria. And PCOS, I think mostly people firstly think of those that have polycystic ovaries. My understanding would be that it's not always the thing that kind of, dictates whether or not like you have this. Okay, so there's this, obviously you can see there's 3 different areas. So you've actually got to have 2 out of the 3 in order to be, categorically, I guess, diagnosed to say that you have PCOS. So it's very multifactorial, as you can see, and there are different classes of PCOS. So firstly, we'll just explore what some of these different things are. So obviously you can have like polycystic ovaries, but you'll also have to have one or the other of the other 2 types. And again, those might sound quite rare, or you may never have heard of them. But the hyperandrogenism is elevated, for example, elevated testosterone. And then generally that kind of is the sort of increase of like some hair. So, if you get more hair than it seems normal, and like in comparison to, I don't know, maybe the other women in your family, for example. And another one would be, the other sort of circle there is the oligoanovulation, and this is basically to do with menstrual cycle disturbances, so missed periods and amenorrhea and that sort of thing. So hopefully that just allows you to kind of understand a little bit about this diagram, and then just to take it back that PCOS in the center there, in order to have it, you've got to have, either side of those circles. So you've got your classic PCOS, again, with like the hairy facial or whatever, or just more hair in general. And that kind of pairs in with menstrual cycle issues. And then like down here at the bottom, again, menstrual cycle issues with polycystic ovaries. And then across the top, this one I believe is slightly rarer. The polycystic ovaries with the the extra testosterone and hair and that sort of thing. So classic characteristics, if you like, of PCOS. So there can be some menstrual cycle dysfunction, and again the hair increase as well. So the hypoandrogenism, which again we know that there can be issues with regards to things like infertility, etc. And then you've got some metabolic issues, which I guess is probably the most of the concern really when it comes to thinking about diet and exercise. And so with this, it's more to do with the insulin resistance and the increased risk factors for type 2 diabetes later on, and also potentially some cardiovascular issues as well. And there can be a little bit of some, associated mental health issues as well, or even just like mindset, if you like. But again, this is an area that perhaps maybe needs a little bit more thought into as well. And again, just reaching out. I'll always say that, if there are things like that do really impact your quality of life, then it's definitely always worth exploring and going to speak to the appropriate qualified people, because I am not a therapist in that sense, like a mental health therapist or anything like that. So I don't deal with the deep psychology of stuff. But it's just something to make you aware with. Where I can help you make changes are to do with things like your exercise and your nutrition. Okay, so so let's move forward. Okay, so we've kind of touched on this already, but it's a condition that can actually affect 1 in 10 women with can actually affect a lot of women, right? But actually it sounds like it's a condition that affects 1 in 10 women, with up to 70% of those women, or of women with the condition actually being like undiagnosed and actually not knowing that they've had it. So if you feel like you have PCOS, or you've got some of the symptoms, then it's definitely worth reaching out to your GP and exploring, getting tested, etc., and finding out a little bit more about the type and what things you can do. What we do know is that symptoms can be managed via lifestyle changes. So, for example, exercise and diet as well, and there could be a part of that could do with like stress as well. So insulin resistance appears to be a key factor in PCOS, although it's not in all individuals. So not all individuals with PCOS actually have the insulin resistance issue. Okay. So I've added in a little the reference to the research paper for that one. So insulin resistance, it basically means, let's say, less sensitive to insulin. So basically the body is not going to be as great as disposing the glucose from the blood, okay, and obviously taking it to the cells, etc., to be utilized and used. So example, we've talked about this before, like muscle and fat cells. But by reducing the insulin resistance, we can help improve other metabolic health markers. So most studies have looked at insulin resistance in relation to type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease, which is what we kind of touched on already. And I know that this is generally the biggest concern that we think about, and especially when we think about insulin resistance. So just to kind of put it out there, it's not that we have an issue with carbs, because that's usually the first thing that people think of to say, oh my God, I need I need to have less carbs, etc. But what we need to think about is that when we eat, a natural response to eating is having the insulin is released from the pancreas, and that comes in, and you've got the energy, or the blood glucose, the glucose within the bloodstream. That's job. The insulin's job is to basically like get rid of it and push it out and utilize it. Okay. When we have insulin resistance, there's obviously a problem with that mechanism or that thing happening. Okay, so what can we do? What can I help you with? And how can we help improve some of your lifestyle factors? So resistance training, this is one of the reasons why we do resistance training. There's many reasons or benefits to it, and actually even high intensity interval training. So again, you'll notice that for some of you, you'll have like HIIT towards the end of your session as well. And it's such a good way of, helping get some cardiovascular training in a short amount of time. But with regards to this, the resistance training or HIIT, where possible, is going to improve the insulin sensitivity. So that's the IS means, and basically burn the glucose, okay, or help disperse it. So some of the things that we can do is focus on a healthful diet with an emphasis on fruit, veggies, and protein. We're not thinking about, cutting carbs or anything here, but just being mindful in terms of, it would be a good idea to actually have more of your like carbs, if you like, heading towards veggies and fruit, for example. So I did actually see something with regards to protein is really helpful, but also fruit. There seems to be an effect with helping improve that sensitivity with the fruit. So PCOS can or may, let's say it's may, make it more difficult to lose weight, but this doesn't always mean that it's not going to happen. So it may make it more difficult. But all this truly means is that we have less calories. So we just apply a greater calorie deficit, okay? Unfortunately, but the ways that we can increase that deficit or like move that energy balance, if you like, are things like, yes, the calories, but also adding in exercise as well. I'm not a massive fan of massively increasing your cardio output, but again, it may help. Okay. So when it comes to weight loss and not being able to lose the weight or wondering why the weight isn't shifting, some of the things that may be overlooked is the underreporting. So either that that you're underreporting, or you don't know that you're underreporting. And this, again, it's like dotting your I's and crossing your T's. When we're talking about underreporting, so you may be consuming more than you actually input. You might know that for sure, or you might not know that. And when we're thinking about the instances where you might not know, it's generally because you're tracking, you might be guesstimating, or maybe there's an issue with your weighing scales for your food scales, or you are doing a bit of like guesstimating, and therefore we're not sure if you're really overshooting or not. So it's really important that we apply some stringency here. Okay. So yeah, basically you are not in a calorie deficit. So we know that consistency is incredibly difficult, but it is of paramount importance, especially when we are trying to change something. We're trying to shift things as well. It's really important that you try and stick to things. And again, we can look at various different methods if something's not working. So things that we could look at are, just going to move the toolbar a sec. Things that we could try, large deficit for a number of weeks, and then we could go into like maintenance for a week. Okay. This might actually suit some of you that potentially may have PCOS. It can be helpful with getting away from diet mindset. And I know that if weight loss is, the key factor here, or weight loss, toning, or fat loss, and then we need to be at a deficit, that sometimes that road and that train can be really, really hard, and it can take its toll on you mentally, emotionally, and physically. Especially when we're thinking about things like the menstrual cycle as well. So one of the things that we could do is looking at your schedule, your diary. If you haven't got things in the diary, we could really hone down on a larger deficit for a number of weeks. So we could just do that for a couple of weeks there. So like, I don't know, like 3 to 6 weeks. And then we could drop in a nice maintenance week. Okay. And maintenance weeks does not mean like a cheat week. Maintenance means we literally take your calories up to maintenance. Again, that might help with things like energy output. You might be able to perform better in some of your lifts. So there's definitely lots of different benefits in that respect. So you want to avoid consuming a diet with a heavy amount of carbs. And when we are looking at carbs, we're opting for more low GI or high fiber sources. Anti-inflammatory. So when we're talking about this, we're looking at the fats, for example. We want to focus on like monounsaturated fats, for example, things like your omega-3s, which again, we can get from like your salmon and your avocado as well. So we're really looking at more of a Mediterranean-based diet. So we are ticking off the veggies. We are getting some whole grain legumes in there, some salmon, some avocados, some nuts, and fruit. So we talked about fruit, but fruit is really going to help. And again, this may help with like symptom management. Okay. And then, yeah, that's another thing to actually point out really is when we are thinking about calories, it's so easy to just think about the protein, but it's really important to also think about your fat intake. You don't want to diet heavy in just like protein and carbs. We really do need those fats in to help with hormonal health as well. When we are thinking about supplements, I'll say this for the vast majority of people, that vitamin D is really important, especially for those of us that live in a colder, cooler climate. So a lot of you girl bosses, you are based in the UK. We do not get the sun, like rarely. Okay. And then when we do, we're stuck indoors working, etc. So it's really important to supplement. And what studies have found is that many women with PCOS actually having a deficiency. So whether that is just an association, quite possibly, yeah. And then you've got the omegas. The omegas are going to help with that hormonal health. They're going to help with your menstrual cycle, and also the fact that there may be some elevated testosterone. Okay, so when we're coming back and we're looking at some of those really long wordy things that we were talking about at the beginning with testosterone, to do with like basically more hairiness or masculine profile, etc. When we're talking about appetite control now, with those that have PCOS, women with PCOS have a deranged appetite regulation associated with the increased levels of testosterone. So it's really good to try and get down to the tracking, be mindful about the hunger as well. And this is where things like, so we've talked about recently, like volume foods and stuff, where the volume food might help. And then also increasing that protein intake or making sure you're getting those targets is going to help with the satiety of your meals and help you feel fuller and help you feel more satisfied with what you're eating as well. Love this word. Postprandial thermogenesis is reduced in those with PCOS. So we talked about, when we're thinking about like the thermogenesis, so the act of actually burning the calories, etc., and the digestion, etc. Postprandial basically means after you've had your meal. So immediately after you're having your meal, that effect that normally happens where you just start to utilize those calories can be reduced. So this just makes weight loss harder, but it's not got anything to do with not tolerating carbs. Okay. But unfortunately, it's got everything to do with the harsh reality of going for even lower calories for dieting, unfortunately. And again, I did talk about, there could be some tactics that we do in terms of changing things, etc. Okay. That's pretty much it for me in terms of like PCOS. Again, this is something that we could have a look at. I mean, you may have heard that some people, I don't know, they might try different diet types. The biggest thing I would say is get tracking, make sure that we know what's going on with that, and it's not sort of just guesstimating, sticking to that, getting into that calorie deficit and sticking at it, keeping consistent, and just doing the work. It's hard and it's boring, I get it, but yeah, it's really important as well. So that is all for me on this topic. And again, if you've got any further questions after listening to this, then please shoot me a DM. So for those of you girls on the Girl Boss Method, you can either DM me privately or in the group, and we can get having those questions answered. And for those of you that have stumbled across this podcast and you're keen on the Girl Boss Method, how things work, and maybe you want a little bit more information on how maybe you have PCOS and how that's affecting your progress, etc., then shoot me a DM on Instagram. My name is Richu Brar, so that's spelled RICHUBRAR. That's on Instagram. This has been the Girl Boss Method, and we will see you here next time.